Every case is a maze, every clue a door. Welcome to the journey of rediscovering the classic detective masterpieces of Sherlock Holmes. And today, we step into the very first chapter, The Woman with the Veiled Face.
One morning in the latter part of 1896, I received a hastily written note from Sherlock Holmes, inviting me to come immediately to Baker Street. When I arrived, I found him sitting in a room filled with smoke, with a plump, elderly woman in the chair opposite him who looked like a landlady. "This is Mrs. Marilow of South Brixton, Mr. Watson," my friend said, raising his hand. "She has no objection to smoking, so you may indulge yourself at your leisure. Mrs. Marilow has a most interesting story to tell us, and it may be that things will develop, so your presence here will be most useful. If I can be of any assistance, you will understand, Mrs. Marilow, that if I go to Mrs. Ronder, I shall hope for a witness. Tell her that first." "God bless you, Mr. Holmes," the visitor said. "She wants to see you so much that you can call everyone in the neighborhood and she won't mind. Then we'd better start early this afternoon. Before we go, make sure we've got the facts straight. Tell me everything again, so that Dr. Watson can understand the situation. You said earlier that Mrs. Ronder has been your guest for 7 years, and you've only seen her face clearly once?" Mrs. Marilow said, "By God, I wish I'd never seen her face. Her face was badly damaged, wasn't it?" "You can't call it a human face, Mr. Holmes. It was absolutely horrible. Once, my milkman saw her standing at the window looking at the view, and he was so shocked that he overturned the whole pail of milk. One time I suddenly saw her face. She immediately covered her face and said, 'Mrs. Marilow, now you understand why I always cover my face with this veil, right?' Do you know anything about her past? I know nothing about her. When she came to rent the house, was there any introduction? No, but she paid in cash and always paid a lot in advance. The rent was paid quarterly and there was no haggling. I am this old and alone in difficult times. How could I refuse such a rich and generous guest? What made her choose to rent your apartment? Wishing you a happy reading at www.gaxoc.com, a small attic for book lovers. My apartment is quite far from the road, quieter than other apartments for rent. Besides, I only take one lodger. I have no relatives myself. I guess she has rented many places, but she likes mine the best. She needs quiet and spares no expense. You said that since she came here, she has never shown her face, except for that one time. This is quite a peculiar and extremely strange story, so I understand why you want to investigate it so much. That's not what I want, Mr. Holmes. As for me, I'm satisfied with the rent. There is no quieter tenant than her." "Then why did you come here?" "It's because of her health, Mr. Holmes. She's getting weaker and weaker. Besides, she has some very terrifying secrets in her heart. Sometimes she would scream, 'Murder! Murder!' Another time I heard her scream, 'You cruel beast! You devil!' She screamed in the middle of the night, and her screams echoed throughout the house, scaring me to death. The next morning, I went to see her. I sincerely advised her, 'Mrs. Ronder, if you have something sad in your heart that you cannot express, you can go to the priest or the police. Maybe they can help you.' 'Thank God I don't need the police,' she said. 'The priest can't do anything to change the past. But before I die, if someone knows the whole story, I might be able to find some comfort.' I told her, 'Oh, if you don't want to, go to the police, then go to that famous detective that everyone knows, Sherlock Holmes.' Forgive me, sir, for being so quick-witted, but she agreed at once. 'Yes, I want such a man.' 'Why didn't I think of that?' she said. 'Please, Mrs. Marilow, send him here at once. If he doesn't come, tell him I'm Ronder's wife, the circus animal trainer. Just say that and give him the name Abbas Parva.' She wrote it down on a piece of paper and gave it to me. 'That name will bring him here at once if he is the man I think he is.' 'I must go, Mrs. Marilow,' said Holmes. 'I must have a word with Dr. Watson now, and it must last until lunch. We can't get to you until 3 o'clock. As soon as our visitor had waddled out of the room, for lack of a better word, Holmes sprang to his feet and plunged into a pile of papers in the corner. For a few minutes, there was only the rustling of papers, and then he gave an audible sigh of satisfaction. I knew then that Holmes had found something. He sat down on the floor, his legs crossed, surrounded by a large pile of books, and an open volume of newspapers on his lap. The case was a headache for me at the time, Watson. Look at the notes in the margins of the articles in these books and newspapers. I admit that I could not solve the case, but I was convinced that the autopsy was wrong. Don't you remember the tragedy at Abbas Parva? Nothing, Holmes. You were with me. But my own impression of the case is very dim, because no evidence was found and no one asked me for help. Look at these notes. Can you tell me the main points? It is not difficult. Perhaps as soon as I tell you, you will remember all the circumstances. Everyone knows the name of Ronder. He was a rival of Womble and Sanger, and one of the biggest circuses of the time. But before the tragedy happened, Ronder had become a drunkard, and he and his circus were going downhill. The tragedy happened when his circus was staying overnight in a small village called Abbas Parva in Berkshire. They were on their way to Wimbledon. They just set up camp for the night and did not perform because the town was too small to cover the expenses of the show. Among the animals they brought with them was a North African lion named Sahara King, which was very ferocious. Ronder and his wife often showed off their skills inside the cage. Here is a photo of them performing. You can see that Ronder was a strong, wild man, and his wife was a beautiful woman. The investigator said that the Sahara lion had been showing signs of concern for a long time. However, due to subjectivity, neither Ronder nor his wife paid proper attention to this. Every night, Ronder or his wife would personally feed Sahara. Sometimes one person, sometimes both of them. But up until now, this job had never been done by anyone else, because they believed that as long as they fed the Sahara lion, it would regard them as a benefactor and not attack them. On that special night 7 years ago, both of them went into the cage to feed Sahara. A terrible tragedy happened, and the details of this accident have never been investigated. At midnight, everyone in the village was awakened by the roar of a lion and the terrible screams of a woman. The circus staff and all the workers rushed out of the tents with lanterns, holding up their lamps and seeing a horrifying scene. Ronder was lying on the ground more than 10 meters from the lion's lair, her head crushed and covered with the claws of the lion. The lair was wide open. Mrs. Ronder lay flat at the feet of the hungry lion, which was roaring with its mouth wide open. Her face was so badly scratched that no one could believe that she would survive. Under the command of Leonardo, a strong young man, and the clown Griggs, some circus performers used long, large sticks to fight off the ferocious lion that was tearing Mrs. Ronder apart and immediately locked the lair. But how the lion escaped remains a mystery. It is speculated that the couple tried to open the door to the cave, but as soon as the door was opened, the hungry and ferocious lion pounced on them. The police were unable to find any evidence. As for Mrs. Ronder, in terrible pain as she was carried to the hospital trailer, she kept shouting, "Coward! Coward!" It was not until 6 months later that she recovered and gave evidence in court. An autopsy was still performed. However, the investigation was later suspended, following the court's verdict. Mr. Ronder died of an occupational accident. Is there any other theory? I asked impatiently. That's right. There were a few details that young policeman Edmonds of the Berkshire Police couldn't ignore. He was a smart guy, but then he was sent to Allahabad. I was interested in this case because he came here to talk to me about this strange case. Was it a thin guy with blonde hair? Yes, I knew you would remember. What was bothering him? He and I had the same question. The problem is it's hard to imagine how the whole thing happened. Look at it from the lion's perspective. What would it do if it was released? It would take a few steps forward and be in front of Ronder. He turned around, tried to run away, but still could not escape the lion's claws. He fell to the ground, dead instantly. But the beast did not run away, but instead turned its head and pounced on Mrs. Ronder. At this moment, she was standing. In shock next to the beast, the lion rushed forward, knocked Mrs. Ronder down, and tore her face apart. The screams in her coma seemed to blame Mr. Ronder for abandoning her, but in fact he was already dead at that time. How could he still help her? Do you see anything strange here? And if it was not Mr. Ronder, then who was the person she blamed? Yes, you are right. There is another suspicious point. It always haunts me when I think about this case, that along with the roar of the lion and Mrs. Ronder's terrified scream, there was also the shrill scream of some man. That scream was, of course, Mr. Ronder's. If his skull had been crushed by the lion, how could we have heard his screams? At least 2 witnesses said that they heard a man's scream mixed with Mrs. Ronder's screams. I think that everyone in the tent was screaming in panic at that time. As for the other suspicious points, I think I can explain. I would love to hear your opinion. The Ronders were together. When the lion broke out, they were about 10 meters away from the lion's cage. Mr. Ronder panicked and ran away, so he was immediately mauled to death. Mrs. Ronder had the idea of running back to the cage and closing the door, which was her best shelter. She had intended to run towards the cage, but just as she reached the door of the cage, the Sahara rushed forward and pinned her down. She blamed her husband for running away, which had provoked the lion to become even more frantic because if they had worked together to deal with the lion, it might have backed down. That was why she shouted, "Coward! Coward!" in her delirium. Very good, Watson, but there is a small flaw in your excellent argument. What kind of flaw? If both of them were within 10 meters of the cage, how could the lion have gotten out? Could it be that someone had released the lion? Why did it, which usually played with them and performed tricks in the cage, attack them so savagely this time? Perhaps the hidden enemy had deliberately provoked the lion. Holmes began to think silently, and for several minutes he did not speak. "Oh, Watson, there is something very necessary for your speculation. Ronder is a man with many enemies. Edmonds told me that when he is drunk he becomes extremely violent. He is an insatiable tyrant, ready to curse and beat anyone who interferes. I think that the visitor who said that Mrs. Ronder often screams at night is because she dreams of seeing her violent husband again. But in any case, until the truth is revealed, all our speculations are arbitrary." When the carriage stopped in front of Mrs. Marilow's house, we saw her fat figure standing in front of the door. Her intention was very clear, that was, she was afraid of losing a valuable tenant, so before leading us upstairs, she repeatedly warned us not to say or do anything that would cause her to lose this tenant. We agreed, and followed her up the tattered carpeted stairs to the mysterious guest's room. It was a musty room. The ventilation was poor. This was not surprising, for Mrs. Ronder, who lived there, never went out. After nearly a lifetime of keeping wild animals in cages, the guest seemed to have been punished by fate in her old age. She sat silently, thoughtfully, on an old sofa in a dark corner of the room. After years of inactivity, her body had become clumsy, but it was still very full and attractive. A very thick dark veil covered most of her face, revealing only a pretty mouth and a round, attractive chin. I could imagine that she had been a beautiful woman with an unusual demeanor. Her voice was also very sweet and pleasant to the ear. "Mr. Holmes, my name is not unfamiliar to you. I knew that when you heard my name, you would come." She spoke, softly. "Yes, ma'am, but I don't understand how you knew that I wanted to know your story." After my health recovered, when the local detective Edmonds came to interview me, I found out. I didn't tell him the truth. Maybe my lying was an unwise choice. Normally, telling the truth is the wisest choice. But why did you lie to him? Because what I said was related to the fate and life of another person. Although I knew that he was a fool and a coward, I still didn't want my conscience to bother me for ruining him. Our relationship was very, very close. "Are you no longer guilty?" "Yes, I heard that the man is dead." "Then why didn't you tell the police everything you knew?" "Because there was another person involved in the case, and that person was me. I couldn't bear the gossip and the inquisitions of the police and the courts. I don't have much longer to live, and I want to die in peace. I still want to find someone with judgment to tell him about this horrible story. Only then will everything be clear after I die. Madam, I really don't deserve your compliment, but I am also a responsible person. I can't guarantee that after you finish speaking, I definitely won't report it to the police. I don't agree with your way of thinking, Mr. Holmes. I understand your character and your way of doing things very well. Because in recent years, I have been following your investigations regularly, many of which have been resoundingly successful. In these last days, the only pleasure that fate has left me is reading the newspaper, so I rarely miss anything that happens in life. No matter what, I want to try my luck, let you handle it no matter what. Just tell me everything that has been hidden for so long, and I will feel at peace. Then my friend and I here are very honored to hear your story. The woman slowly stood up from her chair, took out a picture of a man from the drawer. He seemed to be a professional circus performer, with a strong and handsome body. In the picture, his muscular arms were placed in front of his firm chest, his mouth smiling under his thick, masculine beard, the smug smile of someone who had conquered many beautiful girls. "This is Leonardo," she said, her voice slightly lowered. "The strong man who gave evidence in the case?" "Yes. Please look at this photo. This is my husband." When I saw the photo of her husband, I was startled. It was an extremely ugly face, full of murderous intent, like a pig with a human face. No, it must be a wild boar with a human face, because besides the animalistic nature, there was something very scary. One could imagine that ugly, disgusting mouth when angry, spitting out clouds of saliva, and the evil gazes emanating from those. Evil, squinty eyes. Bastard, evil, savage. Those were the words to describe Mr. Ronder's sagging, fat face. Gentlemen, these two photos can help you understand a little about my past. I was a poor circus performer. Before I was 10 years old, I was already a hula hoop performer, and when he grew up, this man fell in love with me, if his desire could be called love. In a moment of misfortune, I was forced to become his wife, and from those days on, I lived in hell. He was a devil, always tormenting me. In the circus, everyone knew about his mistreatment of me. He betrayed and abandoned me to seek pleasure with other women. But if I complained, he would coldly tie me up and whip me with a horsewhip. Everyone pitied me and cursed him, but they could not help me. They were all afraid of him like a devil. He was always fierce, and when drunk, he could kill without hesitation. He was arrested by the police many times for beating people and abusing animals, but because he had money, he always got away with it. The good actors all left us. The circus began to decline. It was only Leonardo and I, along with the clown Jimmy Griggs, that kept the circus alive. Later, Leonardo often approached me. You have seen how handsome he was. Now I know that behind that strong body is a very cowardly heart. But compared to my husband, he seemed like an angel. He pitied me, helped me. In the end, our intimacy turned into deep love. It was a love that I had longed for, but did not dare to expect. My husband began to suspect us, but I saw that he was not only a cruel man but also a coward, and Leonardo was the only one he feared. He took revenge by torturing me more and more. One night, hearing me scream so miserably, Leonardo appeared in front of our car. That night, a tragedy almost happened. After the incident, both Leonardo and I thought that tragedy would come sooner or later. He did not deserve to live anymore. We made a plan. Kill him perfectly. Leonardo was a clever and cunning man. He was the one who thought of using the Sahara to kill Ronder. I'm not saying this now to blame him, but because I loved him so much that I was willing to do everything he wanted. He immediately made a hammer with 5 long iron nails that looked like lion claws, intending to deliver a fatal blow to Ronder. To distract the investigation and escape punishment, we would release Sahara right after that. And the case was staged as if Sahara had bitten Ronder to death. That night, it was pitch black. As usual, my wife and I brought food in a large tin bucket to Sahara. Leonardo hid in the corner of the tent that we had to pass. He was too slow. We had already passed him without doing anything. But he still crept up and followed us. I heard the sound of a nail hammer hitting Ronder's head, breaking it open. I could not contain my joy. My heart was pounding. I rushed to the cage, unbolted the lion's cage. Then terrible things happened. You must know how quickly wild animals smell fresh blood. Human blood has a special attraction for them. By strange instinct, the Sahara lion knew right away and immediately pounced on me. Leonardo might have saved me if he had rushed forward and struck the lion with the iron-nailed club, which might have made it retreat. But he lost his temper and panicked when he saw the lion attack me. I heard him scream and run away. By this time, the lion's teeth were deeply embedded in my face, and its foul breath made me faint and no longer feel any pain. I desperately used my two arms to push the huge bloody mouth away and at the same time screamed for help. I had the impression that everyone in the circus was alarmed. After that, I only vaguely knew that some people, Leonardo, Griggs, and a few others, had used all their strength to pull me out of the Sahara's clutches. That was my last sad memory, Mr. Holmes. For several months after that, I lived in a state of extreme terror and gradually recovered. When I recovered, I was terrified when I saw my deformed face in the mirror. I cursed and abused the lion without mercy, not because it had taken my beauty, but because it had not taken my life. Mr. Holmes, I had only one wish at that time, and I had enough money to carry it out. It was to cover my hideous face with a veil so that no one could see it. And I would go where no one I knew could find me. That was the only thing I could do, and I did it. A poor, wounded beast returned to its nest to end its life, to end the tragic and painful life of Eugenia Ronder. After the unfortunate woman had finished, telling the story of her past, we sat in silence for a long time. Then Holmes patted Mrs. Ronder's hand with a deep sympathy that he rarely showed. "You are a pitiful person," said Holmes. "Very pitiful. Fate is so elusive. If there is no recompense, this world is really a cruel game. And Leonardo, how did he live after that? I never saw him again or heard any news of him. Perhaps I was wrong to give him my love. He could have quickly found some girl who admired him, but love is something a woman cannot easily throw away. Even though he abandoned me when I was under the lion's claws, I still could not bear to send him to the guillotine. As for me, I no longer care what happens to me. For in this world, could there be situations more terrible than life? My present life? However, I still tried to follow Leonardo in his fate. Is he alive? Last month, while swimming near Margate, he drowned. I read about it in the paper. After killing Ronder, how did he dispose of the nail-studded mace? This mace is the most remarkable thing in your whole story. I don't know anything more, Mr. Holmes. Near the place where we spent the night on that terrible day, there is a large limestone quarry into which the water flows into a very large and very deep lake. Perhaps he threw it into the lake. Actually, that doesn't matter now. The case is closed. Yes, she replied. The case is closed. We were now rising to leave, but there was something in the woman's voice that interested Holmes. He turned round and said to her, "Your life does not belong to you. You have no right to do anything to yourself. Is it of any use to anyone else? How do you know if it is useful or not? For a world like today, the courage to endure such an unfortunate fate as yours is a precious example for all mankind." The woman's answer was terrifying. She pulled down her veil and stepped into the light. "I wonder if you can bear it?" she asked, her voice filled with anguish. A terrible sight appeared before our eyes. Her face was destroyed beyond description. On that completely destroyed face, the extremely beautiful eyes looked out with sorrow, making the devastated features even more horrifying. Holmes raised a hand, a gesture that expressed both sympathy and opposition to her attitude towards life. We left the room together. 2 days later, I went to Holmes's apartment. He pointed proudly to a small glass bottle containing a blue liquid that stood on the mantelpiece. There was a red label on the bottle indicating poison, and I lifted the cap and smelled a faint almond scent wafting through the room. "Hydrocyanic acid?" I asked in surprise. "Yes, by post." It was written on the note. "Send you what has fascinated me. I will follow your advice." Holmes smiled meaningfully at me and continued, "You can guess the name of this brave woman, Watson?" I nodded slightly and sat down on the sofa, gazing thoughtfully at the flickering fire in the grate.